Hello, everybody. My name is Michael McCormick. You are listening to the Superintendent Hot Seat, where bold superintendent leaders share the real stories behind their most difficult challenges and decisions as they work to improve student safety, wellness, and attendance in a system that's not yet fully prepared to support those students entering our schools. We like to say that because there's been such a shift that we've experienced in student behavior. This podcast aims to engage the nation's top K-12 leaders in meaningful discussions on addressing the growing issues of anxiety, depression, and bullying, as well as violence among students, which greatly affect their ability to learn and feel safe coming to schools, as well as teachers' capacity to teach effectively. Today's guest on the Superintendent Hot Seat podcast is Dr. Gina Zietlow. Gina, welcome. So happy you're here. Superintendent of ABC Unified. Yeah, so I'm going to just kick it off with this big question here, which is if you had to rethink student wellness in your district, whether it's student anxiety, depression, bullying, or violence, what would you do? How are you rethinking this great challenge we're facing?
I think for me, I had my bulk of my career in a high school where you saw just the need at a real visceral level for some kids. For other kids, they would hide what was wrong. But I noticed as we got into about 2010, kids stopped pretending. They just started being very honest and genuine with this is what's wrong. Whether it was something in their home life, something that happened to them, something they were experiencing, they were no longer willing to hide that. And so for me, when I looked at that, I jumped on board with my colleagues, my superintendent at the time, and we started working to have mental health professionals in every school. For our high schools is where we started. That to me has been probably the mainstay for us helping our kids even now, where we have students with the same struggles, behavior issues, life experiences that are sometimes tragic and sometimes just scary. We have resources. And so what we've worked on from there has been this idea that we all have to be able to see, recognize what's happening with kids, and then we know there's a resource there. And so a lot of the work that's happened since the pandemic has been around not only helping teachers be part of the social emotional learning for kids, but trying to have teachers and staff think about their own wellness and their own mental health as you are helping kids, some with really significant issues.
You know, that somehow I'm not surprised by what you just shared, because your school district has a reputation of really taking action early on. And so to hear that you were doing, you know, this really big investment in wellness starting back in like 2010, that's incredible. And so you were pretty well positioned moving into the pandemic in terms of the support systems and structures that you had. And I agree with you. There was a moment during that period where kids, I would say it like this: there was a level of social consciousness amongst students where they were all of a sudden being pretty vocal about the things that they cared about, including their own wellness and sense of belonging. And it was always fascinating to me because I think for the students, they're so much more inviting and accepting than the adults are. So talk to me about that.
Absolutely. Well, I think what's interesting is I can remember very clearly when we brought in the first partnership we did it with an outside agency where their mental health professionals, their counselors would have an office on our campus. It was just a partnership. Um, and one kid would get service, and within a week, they'd have 12 more because they would go tell a friend or they know their friends and they were just coming in droves. And that's where we, after a few years, made a shift and said, these people just need to be part of our district. They need to be employees here. They need to be understanding who we are and be woven into the fabric. Because kids will just come. They will self-refer if they know there is help for them. And adults are the same way in many
Yeah.
ways. If you need help and you know there's help, you will refer yourself.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I see a lot of district organizations spending time on, and other just outside agencies, is this idea of demystifying and destigmatizing mental wellness, and kind of trying to get rid of that shame that I think a lot of people associate with, hey, I need help. And, is there a place where we can kind of systematically learn to be more vulnerable with each other so that we can feel good about reaching out to the appropriate professionals and getting some help. And so, what have you kind of seen in your district that you believe has helped kind of facilitate this shift in thinking?
Yeah. One of the things we did pre-pandemic, I'm trying to think years, um, maybe like 26, 2016, 2017, we began to work with our classified employees around the idea of um, the ACEs study from Kaiser, Adverse Childhood Experiences, around trauma and how people respond in that. And so what we found is that we were trying to address a customer service concept, people complaining that they came in and were treated poorly. But what we realized is it was not the intention of our employees to do that. They did not know how to respond to someone having those experiences. And so we began to help them be able to see what when that person comes in and they're aggressive or they're just seem to be completely disorganized. You may not be seeing someone who doesn't care. You may be seeing someone who's in trouble. They're homeless. They're, whatever the experience is. And so we started there. We began working with administrators to see those things. And that was really helpful because when we then went into the pandemic, all of a sudden our teachers began to see, right? We, to the chagrin of others, made it a rule that at some point when kids logged in, we had to see their face. They had to turn on their camera. There had to be these moments where we could see them. And staff understood, unfortunately, we were looking for signs of maybe something not going well, them not being fed. Who knows? You don't want to assume the worst, but we know that we normally see kids' faces every day. And if something's
That's right.
wrong, you can tell.
That's
So
right.
with that, our teachers were much more open. And that's where we, coming out of the pandemic, we did some work with LACO and partnered with them to provide mental health services through a program they had through the LA County Office of Education. And then we also, as we've transitioned past the pandemic, we have a service with Care Solace. And they are available for all of our students, their families, and our staff, just for that quick ability to get connected if you have an emergency. And what I have tried to push with that is that not just our regular employees who are here all the time, but we share that information and offer that to all of our substitute employees as well.
Oh,
So
that's
that
fantastic. And
so that everyone can have connection to that.
Yeah, and what a wonderful resource, because as you're probably aware, I don't know exactly what statistically, the time frame is to get connected to actual service, but it's, as I remember, it can be a very long period of time for individuals to actually get connected to the help they need. And this is a resource that you're providing, and that's what they specialize in, is getting the people who need the help connected to the appropriate resources. And that's a fantastic way to support not only your students, but their parents, their family members, and the connected school community to getting support they need. And I really, I completely identify with, what you said about, hey, we want to see our kids' faces, and how that caused anxiety for some people within the system, because we were literally and figuratively meeting kids where they were. And I'm getting older, but my memory still is well enough to remember that kids were going to school, in their homes, in homes of family members, and in some cases, back seats of
wherever
the car,
they could sit,
wherever wherever. I mean, we were handing out hot spots, and I remember, one of our kids' parent was a driver, and so, the kid was in the back seat of the car with the hotspot and the Chromebook and trying their best all day long to, stay connected to school. And so we have seen those types of experiences. And I think it's good to get eyes on. And I'm so happy that we are now post-pandemic and kids are in school. And now we're starting to think about, what are some systems and structures where we can actually have that little check-in with every kid on campus, and have some way of cataloging that check-in with kids, just to make sure, they're doing okay.
Yeah.
My goodness. Go ahead.
I know. I was just going to say, I think one of the challenges of being a teacher is exactly that. Like, you come into your classroom every day well aware that you have eyes on those kids. And maybe someone will see them when they go to the cafeteria and get their food. And maybe, if they need help on the playground. But the truth is, the teacher is still our best person to really see if something's going on with a kid. And so that's been a lot of our work, to try and help teachers not be frustrated that part of their day now is that social emotional learning. Teachers want to get to the reading and the writing and the math. Right. They want to change the narrative of what you hear in the national and local discussion of education. But the truth is, our kids need to feel safe. And so our teachers see that. And we've worked in different schools in different ways. But most of our teachers have some kind of daily lesson where they do SEL with the kids. I was in a class a week or so ago, and this class is struggling with multiple kids with behavior issues. And so part of the reading lesson is the social emotional learning. How do I respond when I don't get the correct answer? Right? Like, that's a reality. So I appreciate that people are willing to change. We can't have school like it was.
Well, and I think part of that is a really positive change, because I'll be first to raise my hand, guilty as charged. Back particularly when I was a middle school principal, which was like 2 decades ago, we weren't really looking at the whole child. We were looking at the child's academic abilities.
Mhm.
And that's what we were focusing on. And I think the place where we are now in schools is we're really looking at the whole child, and our definition of what student success looks like has greatly expanded beyond those traditional accountability measures. In other words, is a kid good in reading and math and science and social studies? Now we actually recognize that there's more to kids and what they can do, and frankly, what they're passionate about. And so I bet one of the things that you've been thinking about in your school district is how do we create more opportunities for kids to explore their passions. You've probably got some career and technical education programs that you're pretty excited about. You want to share a little bit about what you're
Sure.
doing in that space?
So they're very extensive. When when we found partnerships for mental health, we also jumped in both feet to career technical education, and so the high schools all have upwards of a dozen pathways that kids can explore. All of our middle schools now have pathways that connect into things happening at the high schools, and we're just starting our work to expand to more of our elementary schools where kids can just explore and try things and, find something that interests them. I think that whole child concept, I think it was part of how many of the education programs in the 70s ran. I saw that in 60s, 70s. I can remember many of my teachers were interested in all of me as a kid, and that was part of what my training as a teacher, even into the 90s. But I think at some point we stopped talking about that because we were dealing with what we're dealing with now. It's we can't understand. I was reading an article today. They can't understand why a kid would graduate from high school but not do well on an exam. It's because the exam doesn't mean anything to the kid, right? Like we can't fake that. I can't make an 11th grader do their best on an exam that they don't want to take. And so, it's trying to work through that. But I do think that exploring just lots of different things. Some of my favorites, we have a welding pathway that is
Awesome.
dually enrolled with the community college, and the kids are getting jobs right
And
out of high
good
school.
jobs with
Good
good
jobs.
pay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
They're doing great. The other one that I love is we have sports medicine that's growing, and the middle school has it. So the
Oh,
middle school
beautiful.
kids then get to high school and they go and they help. They're ready to help right away on the football field, on the basketball court, wherever we need them. And it's practical and hands on with, their peers. That's been a lot of fun. The one I'm excited about is an aviation pathway.
Very
And the
cool.
concept there will be both learning to fly, being able to log hours in a simulator. But the other side of that pathway is to be a mechanic on airplanes. So I have two auto shops remaining in my district. We only ever had two, and so they're still here, but they are both just exploring different things. Um, yeah.
That's really exciting. And I think it's exciting for the kids too. And it's interesting. You spoke about how, uh, we used to pay more attention to the whole child. And I believe that because I was a kid in the early 70s, and I felt like my teachers cared for me, and I felt like there was more to school than just the instructional or academic aspects of school. And you're right, somewhere along the way we shifted to this focus of accountability, which was not necessarily a terrible thing. I mean, and then when we really started to pay attention to various student groups and how they were performing and what those gaps in performance, I think that was all good. But I think now we're continuing to do that work, and we are thinking more about the whole child at the same time, which I think is a great space to be in. I always tell people, I think, if thank goodness I'm alive during this period of time, because things are moving so quickly. And to me, it's a great and exciting time to be in education. We're going to pause here for a quick 30-second break for a message from our producer, SchoolBeat, formerly MooZoom, which is the only SEL platform both educators and students truly love. With low-lift, Netflix-style choose-your-own-adventure lessons featuring real kids navigating real-life challenges, daily wellness check-ins, and real-time insights into what students really feel. SchoolBeat is where every heart has a voice and every voice has a beat. Well, welcome back to the Superintendent Hot Seat podcast. I'm here with our guest today, Dr. Gina Zietlow from ABC Unified. We're so happy to have you on the show today, Gina. I want to switch gears just a little bit and talk about you. And I'd like you to start from birth. No, I'm totally teasing.
Be careful what you ask for.
Yeah, that's right. But, I think one of the struggles, and this is kind of a systematic struggle, is that for some people, it's hard for them to get to know the superintendent and to realize that the superintendent is more than somebody who is just sitting in the big seat at the district office, that superintendents actually care very deeply about children. What a novel concept. And so, what are the things that you worry about in your role in the district? And how can we gain some insight from those things that are keeping you awake at night?
Yeah. I think for me, and this is a concept that I learned as a principal, and I learned it starting as an assistant principal, and it was hard, is I can't just care about the kids.
Yeah.
I have to care as much about the adults who work with the kids as the kids. And I have to remember that my job is no longer working with kids. My job is working with adults. And so I embrace that. And I think it has served me well. It's made me realize the power of working with adults. But with that, there's challenges that come and struggles. Children do things they shouldn't. Sometimes adults do things they shouldn't. And I have to walk through, and I like to tease and say, it's like in The Giver. I'm like the old man carrying all of the information and the pain, but that's part of the role. I have to know and understand what we're walking through so that decisions are made in the best interest of children and the adults who serve them. So it's a heavy load sometimes.
It is a heavy load to carry, and I don't know, you've got me thinking, and I by the way, I think you're spot on. It's being empathetic enough and creating a culture within the district so the adults can thrive in service to the students. Yes. And with this kind of culture of accountability, there's a tension that exists between innovation and compliance. And so creating that space where the adults feel liberated enough to do the right things on behalf of kids. And so what are some things that you've been able to do? And I think you've got a long history in ABC of
I do.
really doing some special things to create that culture of psychological safety for the adults in your system.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
So I think you have to approach that in different ways. One of the things that I have done, this is my third year, it's third year as superintendent, where I've done a book club and we've, talked about a book, and I try and pick things that I think um, are relevant to the adults and will help them be better with kids. So we did Your Brain on Art, and we did um, the story about when you wonder when you wonder you're learning, about Mr. Rogers. This year is a little more deep. We're doing Childhood Disrupted, which is a little bit heavy, but I think it reflects kind of the things that staff are seeing with kids and families and even in their own lives. So, from that perspective, just trying to be available 3 times a year as we have these book clubs. People come and I usually share, and I'm open and I'm telling them, my thoughts on things. I think that helps people connect. Um, One of the other things that I have done now 3 years in a row, and it is the hardest thing I do and the best thing I do. I look to spend a day at all 30 of my schools.
Yeah, that
I just,
is
I cut out a
so
full day
powerful.
and
Yes.
I go and I'm there. I try and not be there when they're trying to unload the bus. No one needs me there for that. I try and stay out of the way, but my goal in those is to see not only all of the staff doing work, but to walk with my principal for a full day. Sometimes they have to pause and go deal with something, and I just continue classroom to classroom because I want to see every teacher and all of the kids. Um, I want to see what the learning is, what kids are doing. And sometimes you come in and they're taking a test, and that's what kids are doing that day. In second period geometry, they're taking a test. That's okay. I like to see what's real. Um, and then I try, as part of those, every time I have lunch with a group of kids, and I ask the principals to make it a diverse group of kids. So they're quiet at first because they don't really know each other. They're coming from all over the place, but it gives me a good insight as to what they're interested in, what's working for them. You know, it, I ask them, usually one of my questions is, if you're stuck and you don't know what to do, what do you do? And these kids are resourceful, and I can tell that their teachers have taught them how to be resourceful because they say all the things that they should say, right? Well, I'll talk to a friend, or So I love those days, but they're very hard, and they are worth every day. I have to do my email when I get home that night.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, I did something similar for many years, and I think that getting in those classrooms and just acknowledging people
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm,
acknowledging the work that's happening within the district, um, showing that you care by being there. I heard it someplace said, what's the best thing you can do is you can show up. You show up for people, and that's what you do, and that's part of it. And I also think that kind of gets back to that connectivity where it humanizes the role of the superintendent. You're a real person who can be present with kids and adults on a campus, and you care deeply about what's going on. And so it's that fine line, because you really don't want people to think you're there in any sort of evaluatory role. It's really just to support the work and support them and frankly, see the incredible things that are going on in your schools. I mean, there is amazing adults throughout all of these systems and incredible students. And it's nice to see that in action. I know if I was having a bad day as a secondary school principal, which I know you were too, I would often retreat to band practice.
Oh, and I hid in the athletic office.
Right, that's right. And so we all have our little places where we go to kind of like refill the cup.
The kids come in.
Yes. Yep. And that's powerful. And when you get to be superintendent, those places where you can retreat are far and few between. Right. And so
you have to make it.
You have to make the time for that. And so we are coming to the end of the time today on the Superintendent Hot Seat podcast. And one of the things I always like to do to kind of wrap things up is ask you, what are you grateful for? What is on your gratitude list?
I think as a whole, I am grateful for really the people that choose to work in schools. I can't imagine something more fulfilling as a career. Recently, some of my colleagues who I knew when I was a young teacher and a new administrator have passed on, and going to their services and hearing their family talk about how much it meant to them to, be the lead custodian at the high school or to be an art teacher, and why that was important to them just reminds me that, we go into this wanting to help and wanting to be available for kids the way someone was available for us in many cases. And so I think I would just say the people I work with, whether it's at the district or at the school sites, like in any setting for kids, 99% of everyone is doing what they should be doing,
That's right.
And so I'm okay helping the 1% move in a better direction.
Yeah.
Right.
No, that's really good. We all have people in our lives. I certainly have, who saw something in me that I didn't quite yet see in myself. And, we think back to those life-changing moments. Like I had a supervisor before I got into education. I was working juvenile probation and working maximum security at juvenile hall, graveyard shift. And he came by the unit where I was working, and it was probably 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. He says, "Do you want to be my age?" At the time, he was probably in his mid-50s. He said, "Do you want to be my age, working graveyards, weekends, and holidays, and never seeing your family?" He says, "You seem like a pretty bright guy. Why don't you go back to school, get your teaching credential, and see if you can have a positive impact on youth before they get tangled up in the juvenile justice system?" And I took his advice, and it changed my life. So what, kind of similarly, I know that you've had people that have had a big impact on your life. Talk about one.
Well, I think for me, I knew I wanted to be a teacher. I knew I wanted to be a high school principal. What I didn't ever think I would be the superintendent of a school district. And I'd like to tell you there's one person, but there's about 6.
Okay.
Who all they just were relentless with me.
It was a group effort, huh?
Right. So, but I think the person who probably pushed the most was, he was not superintendent yet. He was Dr. Gary Smuts. He was the superintendent eventually here, but he was relentless in sending me notes through the district mail to go and get my doctorate and get my admin credential, relentless, to the place where I was like, okay, I'm just going to do it so he'll stop sending me notes.
That is fantastic.
Yeah. But there were people no, that's not, you're going to be, and I'm like, what do you know? They knew. I didn't know.
Yeah. Isn't that funny? Oh my gosh. Yeah. It has been a real honor to be with you today on the Superintendent Hot Seat podcast. I so appreciate you joining the show. Glad and wish you much, much continued success. there in your district. And thanks for sharing some real nuggets with the audience today.
Glad to help and glad to be part. Thank you.
You bet. You take care. Thanks so much. Dr. Gina Zietlow, Superintendent of ABC Unified School District.